The morning sun rose over New Haven, painting the colonial settlement in shades of gold and amber. 8,000 people called this world home. And today, nearly all of them had gathered in the central square. They wore their best clothes, though many were simple farming garments, cleaned and pressed with care. The mood was quiet, respectful, tinged with sadness, but also gratitude. Captain Daniel Morrison had lived a full life of 73 years. He helped found this colony 3 decades ago, back when New Haven was nothing but empty plains and distant mountains. He protected the settlers through the hard early years when food was scarce and the work was endless. When raiders threatened the colony in its 5th year, Daniel led the defense force that drove them away. When sickness swept through the settlement in year 12, he organized the medical response that saved hundreds of lives. He was a father figure to many, and a real father to his daughter Amy. Lieutenant Amy Morrison stood beside her father's casket, her military uniform crisp and proper. She was 32 years old and served in the Colonial Defense Force, just like her father had. Her eyes were red from crying, but she stood straight and strong. Daniel would have been proud of her bearing. The casket rested on a platform in the center of the square. It was made of local wood, polished until it gleamed. On top lay Daniel's old service cap and the medals he earned over 40 years of protecting human colonies. Around the platform, rows of chairs held the elderly and infirm. Everyone else stood in respectful silence, forming a circle that stretched across the entire square. Administrator Greg Palmer stepped forward to give the eulogy. He was a stocky man in his 50s, with gray hair and a weathered face. He had known Daniel since the first day they landed on this world. "We gather today to honor a man who gave everything to this community," Greg began, his voice carrying across the silent crowd. Daniel Morrison was not born on New Haven, but he made it his home. He planted the first crops with his own hands. He built the first school where our children learn. He stood watch on cold nights so that we could sleep safely. Greg paused, emotion making his voice thick. He taught us that a colony is more than buildings and farms. It is people caring for each other. It is neighbors becoming family. Daniel believed that humanity's future among the stars would only work if we remembered our humanity. Several people in the crowd wiped away tears. Children who Daniel had taught to read and write stood with their parents. Farmers who learned their trade from him bowed their heads. The entire settlement had a Daniel Morrison story, a moment when he helped them or guided them, or simply listened when they needed someone to talk to. Amy Morrison stepped forward when Greg finished speaking. She reached down and carefully arranged her father's medals on his chest. Her hands shook slightly as she did this, the final gesture of a daughter saying goodbye to her father. She placed her own hand over his cold one for a moment, then stepped back to attention. The colony's small choir began to sing an old Earth song about going home. The melody was simple and sad, and many in the crowd joined in quietly. The words spoke of green hills and flowing rivers, of a place where the weary could finally rest. It was a song humans had sung at funerals for centuries, carried from Earth to every world where humanity now lived. The song was halfway finished when the sky changed. 3 massive shapes appeared overhead without warning. They were ships, each one larger than any building in the colony. Their hulls were dark metal, covered in strange angular patterns. They hung in the air like predators, blocking out the sun and casting shadows across the funeral gathering. For a moment, everyone simply stared upward in confusion. New Haven rarely saw ships this large. Trade vessels visited once a month, but they always announced their arrival. These ships had appeared silently, suddenly, with no greeting or explanation. Then the weapons fired. Beams of bright blue energy lanced down from the ships. They struck the crowd with terrible precision. The first blast hit near the platform, and 17 people died instantly, their bodies simply gone in flashes of light and heat. Amy Morrison saw the beams coming toward a group of children standing near the casket. She threw herself forward, pushing them away with all her strength. The beam meant for the children hit her instead, and she fell without a sound. Screams filled the air. People ran in all directions, desperate for cover. More beams struck the square, tearing through the crowd. The casket where Daniel Morrison lay in peace exploded into splinters, his medals scattered across the scorched ground. Greg Palmer was thrown backward by a blast that hit the platform. He crashed into a row of chairs, pain shooting through his left arm. Blood ran down his face from a cut on his forehead. Through ringing ears, he heard a voice booming from the ships above. "Attention, human settlement. This is Commander Vekthar of the Xelthian Empire. You have established a colony in space claimed by the Empire. You will evacuate this world within 48 hours. Resistance will result in complete destruction of your settlement. This is your only warning." Greg dragged himself to his feet, cradling his injured arm. Around him, the square was chaos. Bodies lay motionless on the ground. The living tried to help the wounded, while others fled to nearby buildings. Smoke rose from a dozen impact points. The beautiful morning had become a nightmare in seconds. Lieutenant Amy Morrison lay near what remained of her father's casket. She had died protecting children, just as her father had lived protecting others. Near her body, a young boy she had saved was crying, calling for his mother. Greg stumbled toward the colony's communication center, his mind racing. They had no military ships in orbit. Their defense force consisted of 20 security officers with small arms. Against 3 warships, they had no chance of fighting back. But he had to do something. He had to tell someone what had happened here. He reached the communication center and fell into the operator's chair. His hands shook as he activated the emergency distress beacon. It would reach the nearest human military base in a few hours. He began recording a message, and his voice was steady despite the shock and pain. "This is Administrator Greg Palmer of New Haven Colony. We are under attack by Xelthian forces. They fired on a civilian gathering without provocation. 17 confirmed dead. Dozens wounded. The attack occurred during a funeral service. Repeat, they attacked us during a funeral. We need immediate assistance." He sent the message on all emergency channels, then sat back in the chair. His arm throbbed with pain, and blood still dripped from his forehead. Through the window, he could see the 3 Xelthian ships hovering above the colony like dark angels of death. Greg Palmer had no way of knowing that his message, part the distress signal from New Haven, traveled through space at faster than light speeds, carried by emergency beacon protocols that gave it priority over all other communications. It reached Firebase Sentinel, the nearest human military installation, in just under 3 hours. A junior communications officer named Peter Hayes received it first, and his face went pale as he listened to Administrator Palmer's message. Peter immediately forwarded it to the base commander. Within 5 minutes, Admiral Kevin Chen was in the command center, with his senior staff gathered around the holographic display. They listened to the recording in silence. When it finished, the room remained quiet for several long seconds. Admiral Chen was 58 years old, a career military officer who had seen combat in 3 different conflicts. He was known for being calm under pressure, for thinking carefully before acting. His staff had never seen the expression that now crossed his face. "They attacked during a funeral," he said quietly. The words seemed to hang in the air. "They fired on mourners. They killed people who were burying their dead." His operations officer, Commander Lisa Grant, spoke up. "Sir, we can have the 3rd Fleet ready to jump in 6 hours. New Haven is 4 days away at maximum speed." Kevin nodded slowly. "Prepare the fleet. But before we move, I want this information sent everywhere. Every human military command, every colony, every government office. I want every human being in known space to know exactly what happened at New Haven." "Sir?" Lisa looked uncertain. "You want to broadcast this widely?" "That is unusual for an active military situation." Kevin turned to face her. "Commander, the Xelthians need to understand what they have done, and they will not understand unless every human understands first. Send the full report, include Palmer's message, include the casualty list. Make sure everyone knows that Amy Morrison died shielding children at her father's funeral." The message went out within the hour. It spread through human space like fire through dry grass. Military commands received it through official channels. Civilian networks picked it up from news services. Within 12 hours, there was not a human settlement anywhere that had not heard what happened at New Haven. The reaction was immediate and visceral. On Earth, the Human Coalition Council called an emergency session. Representatives from 47 colony worlds gathered in the Great Assembly Hall, their faces grim. Usually, these sessions involved hours of debate, political maneuvering, and compromise. Not today. Representative Laura Bennett of Earth stood to address the council. She was known as a voice for peace, someone who always sought diplomatic solutions. She had opposed military expansion and argued for restraint in past conflicts. Many expected her to counsel caution now. "We have worked for 3 generations to be good neighbors in this galaxy," Laura began. Her voice was steady, but everyone could hear the anger beneath it. "We have negotiated fairly. We have respected other species' territories and customs. We have tried to show that humanity can live peacefully among the stars." She paused, looking around the chamber. "The Zelthians have shown us that some species do not value peace. They do not value life. They attacked a funeral. They killed mourners. They killed a daughter who was burying her father. They killed children who came to honor a man who protected them." Laura's voice grew stronger. "This is not a border dispute. This is not a political disagreement. This is an attack on something fundamental to who we are as humans. Every culture in human history, across every continent and every era, has held funerals sacred. We protect mourners. We respect the dead. The Zelthians did not just attack New Haven. They attacked our humanity itself." She looked directly at the council members who usually opposed military action. "I vote for immediate military response. Not for revenge, but to teach a lesson that must be learned. Some lines cannot be crossed. Some acts demand consequences." The vote was called. It was unanimous. Every single representative voted to authorize military action. Even the colonies that had argued for isolation and neutrality voted yes. Even the representatives who had never supported military spending voted yes. The news spread from Earth to every human world. And everywhere, the response was the same. At the Military Recruitment Center on New Detroit, the line of volunteers stretched around the block by the next morning. Most were civilians with no military training. They signed up anyway, driven by fury at what happened at New Haven. Jack Murphy, a factory worker, stood in line with his neighbor. "I am 42 years old," he said. "I have never fired a gun. But I had a grandmother's funeral when I was 8. And it was the saddest day of my life. My whole family was there, crying together. If someone had attacked us then, while we were vulnerable and grieving, I cannot imagine the evil that would take." His neighbor nodded. "My wife died 2 years ago. I buried her with our children beside me. If anyone had harmed my children at that moment, I would have fought them with my bare hands. What happened at New Haven could have happened to any of us." Similar conversations happened on every human world. People who had never cared about colonial politics suddenly cared deeply. People who had never followed military news now watched every update. The attack had touched something primal in human psychology, a shared understanding that funerals were sacred ground. Defense contractors received urgent orders to accelerate production. Shipyards that built cargo vessels began converting their lines to build military transports. Colony governments that had never contributed to the military budget now pledged ships and resources. Admiral Kevin Chen watched the reports flood in from across human space. His Third Fleet was ready to depart, but now he received word that the Fifth Fleet and Seventh Fleet were also moving toward New Haven. More fleets were mobilizing from other sectors. "Sir, we are seeing a total mobilization," Lisa Grant reported. 8 fleets are moving or preparing to move. That is 70% of our total combat strength. The coordination is happening organically. No one ordered this level of response. Kevin understood. This was not about military strategy or political advantage. This was about humanity responding to a violation so profound that it demanded unity. The Zelthians had accidentally done what decades of human politics could not achieve. They had given humanity a single purpose. On New Haven, the situation remained tense. The 3 Zelthian ships continued to orbit overhead. They broadcast threats every few hours, demanding evacuation. Administrator Greg Palmer, his arm in a cast and stitches in his forehead, refused. "We will not leave," he told his people at a gathering in the town hall. This is our home. We built it with our hands. We buried our loved ones in this soil. Daniel Morrison is in that soil now, along with Amy and 16 others. We do not abandon our dead. The colonists, many armed with hunting rifles and farming tools, prepared defensive positions. They knew these weapons would be useless against warships, but they would not go quietly. If the Zelthians landed troops, New Haven would fight. A schoolteacher named Helen Clark organized the children's evacuation to caves in the nearby mountains. She was 40 years old. Usually quiet and gentle, now she carried a rifle and looked at the sky with hard eyes. Daniel Morrison spent 40 years making sure our children were safe, she told the parents helping her. Amy died protecting children at his funeral. We will honor them by protecting these children now. The caves were stocked with food and water. Medical supplies were moved there. If the worst happened, at least the children would survive. But help was coming. Admiral Kevin Chen stood on the bridge of his flagship as the Third Fleet prepared to jump to hyperspace. Around him, his officers worked with focused intensity. No one spoke unnecessarily. Everyone understood the significance of this mission. All ships report ready, sir, Lisa Grant said. Kevin nodded. He activated the fleet-wide communication channel. This is Admiral Chen to all ships. We are going to New Haven to remove a threat and protect our people. But we are also sending a message to the galaxy. We are showing that humanity will not accept attacks on our most sacred traditions. Fight well. Fight honorably. Remember what we are defending. The fleet jumped to hyperspace, beginning the 4-day journey to New Haven. Behind them, more fleets prepared to follow. Across human space, the mobilization continued. Humanity was going to war. Not for territory or resources, but for something far more important. They were going to war because someone attacked a funeral. High Commander Vekthar stood in the command center of his flagship, pleased with how the operation had proceeded. The human colony had not evacuated as ordered, but that was expected. Primitives often required additional persuasion. He had called for reinforcements, and 3 more Zelthian warships would arrive within 2 days. 6 ships total would surely convince the humans to flee. He composed his report to the Imperial Council with satisfaction. Operation at Human Colony New Haven, proceeding as planned. Initial strike demonstrated overwhelming force. Colony remains under our control. Humans have not responded militarily. Recommend expanding operations to other contested worlds. The Imperial Council received his report in their Grand Chamber on the Zelthian homeworld. The council consisted of 12 members, each representing a major sector of their empire. They had ruled 200 star systems for 3 centuries. They saw themselves as bringing order and civilization to the galaxy. Senior Controller Malthan read Vekthar's report aloud. The human colony shows no signs of military response. Our intelligence indicates their nearest fleet is 4 days away. By the time they arrive, we will have sufficient forces to deter any action. Junior Controller Shenix nodded in agreement. Humans are newcomers to space. They have only colonized 47 systems in the past century. They lack the military tradition and strength of established powers. This show of force should convince them to withdraw from disputed territories. What about the intelligence report from Ambassador Thexus? Asked Controller Vexen, one of the few council members who had actually met humans. He seems quite alarmed about our operation. Malthan waved a hand dismissively. Thexus has spent too long among humans. He has developed sympathy for them. His report claims we attacked some kind of sacred ceremony, but their intelligence clearly shows a large gathering. It was a legitimate military target. The council reviewed the surveillance images from New Haven. They saw the crowd in the central square, the organized formation, the presence of a uniformed officer. To their eyes, it appeared to be a military assembly or political rally. They did not understand the casket, the mourning clothes, the ceremony's significance. Sacred ceremonies, Shenix said with contempt. All species have rituals. We should not let primitive superstitions affect our strategic decisions. The humans will understand that might determines territorial rights. The council voted to approve expanded operations. They authorized additional fleet deployments and began planning strikes on other human colonies in contested space. They were confident that crushing human expansion now would prevent future conflicts. Ambassador Thexus received word that his warnings had been ignored. He sat in his office on the diplomatic station, surrounded by books about human culture that he had studied for years. He had learned to appreciate human art, human music, human literature. He understood them in a way his government did not. He knew what was coming. Thexus tried one more time. He sent a detailed report explaining human funeral customs. He described how humans from every culture, every nation, every planet held these ceremonies sacred. He explained that attacking mourners was seen as an act of pure evil in human society. He attached examples from human history, showing how cultures that violated funeral sanctity were remembered as monsters. The Zelthian Empire has committed an act that humans will never forgive or forget, he wrote. We did not attack a military target. We attacked people saying goodbye to their dead. We killed a daughter at her father's funeral. We killed children who came to honor an elder. In human eyes, we are now beyond redemption, unless we immediately apologize and make restitution. He sent the report through official channels and then through unofficial ones. He contacted every council member he could reach. Most did not respond. Those who did told him he was overreacting. 1 week after the attack on New Haven, Zelthian border outposts began reporting unusual activity. Sensor stations detected multiple human fleet movements. Ships were massing in numbers the Zelthians had never seen before. Commander Thelix, in charge of Border Station Outpost 7, sent a worried report to military command. We are detecting 8 separate human fleet formations moving toward our space. Total ship count exceeds 200 vessels. This is far more than their usual patrol strength. Request instructions. Military command reviewed the report with confusion. Human fleets typically operated in small groups, rarely more than 10 ships together. 8 fleets meant the humans had mobilized most of their total military strength. It made no sense. Why would they commit so many resources to a single border colony? Wondered Fleet Coordinator Vexhall. The strategic value of New Haven is minimal. This response is completely disproportionate. They intercepted human military communications and found their answer. The humans were not just responding to the attack. They were responding specifically to the fact that it happened during a funeral. Every communication mentioned it. Every order referenced it. The funeral had become the rallying cry that united all human forces. This is irrational, Vexhall said, reading through the intercepts. They are mobilizing their entire military because we interrupted a ceremony? This makes no strategic sense. But it did make sense, in a way the Zelthians could not understand. They viewed funerals as minor social customs, barely worth noting. They did not grasp that for humans, these ceremonies touched something deep and universal. Every human had attended funerals. Every human had mourned. Every human understood the vulnerability and pain of that moment. The Zelthians thought they had attacked a colony. The humans knew they had attacked something sacred. Admiral Kevin Chen's Third Fleet arrived at New Haven 4 days after the attack. They dropped out of hyperspace in formation. 47 warships appearing simultaneously. On the surface, Administrator Greg Palmer and the colonists cheered when they saw their reinforcements arrive. The 3 Zelthian ships in orbit suddenly faced overwhelming force. Commander Vekthar's flagship detected the human fleet and went to battle stations immediately. 3 more Zelthian ships jumped in to join them, the reinforcements Vekthar had requested. 6 Zelthian warships against 47 human vessels. The odds were clear. Kevin Chen broadcast on all frequencies. This is Admiral Chen of the Human Coalition Third Fleet. Zelthian vessels, you are ordered to power down your weapons and prepare to be boarded. You are charged with war crimes under galactic law. Specifically the targeting of non-combatants during a protected ceremony. Surrender immediately or face destruction. Vekthar hesitated. He had never faced such overwhelming force. His ships were powerful, each one a match for 3 or 4 human vessels in normal circumstances, but not against these odds. And something in the Admiral's voice told him the humans would not hesitate to fire. This is Commander Vekthar. We are on a legitimate military operation in disputed space. We have committed no crimes. Kevin's response was cold. You fired on mourners at a funeral. You killed people who were burying their dead. You killed children. Power down your weapons now. You have 60 seconds to comply. On his bridge, Vekthar looked at his tactical display. The human ships had surrounded his formation completely. Their weapons were charged and locked on. He had seen combat before and recognized a killing formation when he saw one. The humans were not bluffing. All ships, power down weapons, he ordered. Comply with their demands. The Xelthian ships shut down their weapon systems. Human boarding parties, led by Commander Nicole Hayes, transferred to the vessels. Nicole had volunteered to lead the operation personally. She wanted to look Vekthar in the eyes. She found him on the bridge of his flagship. He stood straight, trying to maintain dignity despite his surrender. Nicole walked up to him, with 2 Marines at her sides. Commander Vekthar, you are under arrest for war crimes. Specifically, the deliberate targeting of non-combatants during a sacred ceremony recognized under galactic law. I attacked a legitimate military target, Vekthar insisted. There were uniformed personnel present. Nicole's eyes were hard. You attacked a funeral. There was one officer present, and she was burying her father. Her name was Amy Morrison. She died protecting children from your weapons. You killed 17 people who were mourning, who were vulnerable and grieving. In human law, that is murder. In galactic law, it is a war crime. Vekthar finally began to understand that he had made a serious mistake. But he still did not understand the magnitude of what was coming. The human fleet secured New Haven and established orbital control. But they did not stop there. Admiral Chen had orders from Earth. Orders that reflected the unified will of all human colonies. The 3rd, 5th, and 7th fleets combined into a single armada. Then they jumped to Xelthian space. Their target was not New Haven. New Haven was already secured. Their target was the Xelthian Empire itself. On the Xelthian homeworld, the Imperial Council received reports of the fleet movements with growing alarm. The humans were not simply recovering their colony. They were launching an invasion. How is this possible? Malthan demanded. They do not have the military strength for this kind of operation. They mobilized everything, Vexhal reported. 8 fleets. 70% of their total combat power. They have divided into multiple task forces and are jumping to our border systems. We are tracking strikes on military installations in 16 different locations. The human armada divided into multiple task forces, each one targeting a different Xelthian military installation. They moved with precision and overwhelming force, striking deep into territory the Xelthians had held for decades. The attacks were coordinated to happen simultaneously, preventing the Xelthian military from mounting an effective response. Captain Ryan Foster led a Marine battalion toward a Xelthian military academy on the border world of Thelmar. His orders were specific. Secure the facility, neutralize any resistance, but harm no one unless absolutely necessary. The humans were angry, but they were still following the rules of war. Ryan's ships dropped out of hyperspace above Thelmar and immediately detected the Academy's defensive systems powering up. He broadcast on all channels before they could fire. This is Captain Foster of the Human Coalition Marines. We are here to secure this facility. Power down your defenses and no one will be harmed. You have 5 minutes to comply. The Academy commander was a veteran named Thelkor, who had trained Xelthian officers for 20 years. He looked at his tactical display and saw 6 human warships in orbit. His academy had defensive weapons, but they were designed for training purposes, not real combat. If we surrender, what happens to the cadets? Thelkor asked over the communication channel. The academy housed 300 young Xelthians, students between the ages of 15 and 20, who were training to become officers. Ryan's voice was firm but not cruel. The cadets will be confined to their quarters under guard. They will not be harmed. We do not make war on students or children. Thelkor made his decision. He powered down the defensive systems and ordered all personnel to assemble in the main courtyard. When Ryan's Marines landed, they found the cadets standing in formation, young and frightened but trying to maintain discipline. Ryan walked through the ranks of cadets with his second-in-command, Lieutenant Paul Green. The young Zelthians watched them with wide eyes, probably expecting violence. Instead, Ryan stopped and addressed them. "You are students, not soldiers. You are not our enemies today. We have secured this facility not to harm you, but to send a message to your government." He paused, making sure he had their attention. "Your military attacked a human colony 1 week ago. They fired on civilians who were gathered for a funeral. They killed people who were mourning their dead. They killed children." Ryan's voice grew harder. "We could have attacked your cities. We could have targeted your civilians. But we do not do that. We fight military targets only. We protect students and children, even enemy students and children, because that is what civilized people do. That is what your government failed to do at New Haven." He signaled his Marines to begin securing the facility. The cadets were escorted to their quarters in small groups. Ryan made sure medical personnel checked each one for injuries from the brief orbital bombardment. None were found. Lieutenant Paul Green recorded a video of the operation and broadcast it on public Zelthian networks. The recording showed human Marines treating the young cadets with professional courtesy, providing them food and water, ensuring their safety. The contrast with what happened at New Haven was deliberate and stark. "This is how you treat the vulnerable," Paul said in the recording. "This is how you treat students and children. Even during war. The Zelthian military attacked humans who were vulnerable and grieving. We are showing you that there is a better way." The recording spread through Zelthian space rapidly. Civilians who had supported the government's aggressive stance began to question what their military had done. Parents whose children attended military academies felt grateful the humans had shown restraint. The psychological impact was significant. Similar operations happened across 16 Zelthian border systems. Human task forces struck military shipyards, command centers, supply depots, and defensive installations. The attacks were swift and precise. Zelthian military forces, caught off guard by the scale and coordination, fell back repeatedly. Admiral Kevin Chen coordinated the campaign from his flagship. He studied the tactical reports with satisfaction. Human forces had suffered minimal casualties, while inflicting serious damage on Zelthian military infrastructure. More importantly, they had demonstrated complete fire discipline. Not a single civilian target had been hit. "The Zelthians are retreating from their forward positions," Commander Lisa Grant reported. "Their 4th and 6th fleets are pulling back to defensive positions around their core systems. They are abandoning the border outposts." Quote. Kevin nodded. "They expected a limited response focused on New Haven. They did not expect us to bring the war to them. Continue the advance. I want every military installation within 10 jumps of human space either captured or neutralized." On the galactic stage, other species watched the conflict with growing concern. The Galactic Council, a loose alliance of spacefaring civilizations, called an emergency session to discuss the human-Zelthian war. Ambassador Marcus Hill represented humanity at the council. He was the experienced diplomat who had worked for years to build good relationships with other species. He stood before the assembled representatives and presented humanity's case. The Zelthian Empire attacked a human colony during a funeral ceremony. They fired on mourners, killing 17 civilians, including children. Under galactic law, this constitutes a war crime. Funerals are recognized as protected events across virtually all civilizations. The Zelthians violated not just human customs, but universal standards of civilized behavior. 10. He showed the council the surveillance footage from New Haven. The representatives watched in silence as the Zelthian weapons struck the crowd in the square. They saw Amy Morrison throw herself over the children. They saw the casket explode, scattering the dead man's medals across scorched ground. Several council members, representing species that also held funeral customs sacred, made sounds of distress. The footage was damning. The Zelthian representative, a diplomat named Helvar, tried to defend his government's actions. The gathering appeared to be a military assembly. Our forces acted based on the intelligence available. Marcus cut him off. Your forces fired without warning or verification. They did not attempt communication. They did not identify military targets. They simply killed civilians who were saying goodbye to their dead. That is not a mistake of intelligence. That is a war crime. The council deliberated for hours. In the end, they issued a statement condemning the Zelthian attack and recognizing humanity's right to respond. They did not call for human forces to withdraw. The message was clear. The Zelthians had brought this on themselves. Back in Zelthian space, the Imperial Council finally began to understand the depth of their mistake. Military reports showed human forces advancing on multiple fronts. Civilian communications revealed growing unrest as the population learned what actually happened at New Haven. We must negotiate, Controller Vexen argued. We cannot win a war against an enemy that has mobilized their entire society against us. And we cannot win the propaganda war. The humans have shown restraint in their attacks while we killed mourners at a funeral. Every species in the galaxy now sees us as the aggressors. Malthan refused to accept defeat. We have 200 systems to their 47. We have larger fleets, better technology. We simply need to consolidate our forces. And then what? Vexen demanded. Attack more human colonies? Kill more civilians? The humans are united in a way we have never seen. Every attack we make will only strengthen their resolve. Ambassador Thexus was recalled to the homeworld to advise the council. He stood before them, exhausted from years of trying to bridge the cultural gap between species. I told you this would happen. I warned you that attacking a funeral would unite humanity against us. You did not listen. How could we have known? Shenix protested. How could we have known they would react so strongly to a simple ceremony? Thexus looked at him with something like pity. Because I told you. Because I studied their culture and learned what matters to them. Because I did my job as your ambassador. But you dismissed my warnings as sympathy for the enemy. He pulled up images from the human campaign. Look at what they are doing. They are destroying our military power while carefully protecting civilians. They captured an academy full of cadets without harming a single student. They broadcast that capture to show the galaxy how war should be fought. They are making us look like monsters, by comparison. The council chamber fell silent. The truth was becoming undeniable. The Zelthian Empire had started a war it could not win. Not because of military weakness but because of moral failure. They had violated a sacred tradition and paid the price in galactic opinion and human fury. On New Haven, the colonists began the work of recovery. The central square had been cleared of debris. Bodies had been recovered and prepared for burial. Administrator Greg Palmer, his arm still in a cast, stood with the survivors and planned a memorial. We will bury our dead properly this time, he told them. Daniel Morrison deserves the funeral he was meant to have. Amy deserves to rest beside her father. All 17 of them deserve to be honored. A Marine colonel named Stephen Wright, commanding the human ground forces now protecting the colony, approached Greg. Sir? Admiral Chen has sent word. We have secured the space around New Haven. No Xelthian forces remain within 10 light years. You are safe now. Greg nodded his thanks. Colonel, will your people attend the funeral? We would be honored to have you there. Stephen considered carefully. Sir, I will ask for volunteers. But I think many of my Marines would want to be there. They know why we are fighting this war. They know what the Zelthians took from you. 2 days later, a second funeral was held in New Haven's central square. This time, no enemy ships hovered overhead. This time, human warships stood guard in orbit, ensuring nothing would interrupt the ceremony. This time, the people of New Haven could properly honor their dead. 6 weeks after the attack on New Haven, the Zelthian Imperial Council finally asked for negotiations. They had lost control of 16 border systems. Their military had suffered 3 major defeats. Supply lines were disrupted. Most importantly, civilian unrest was growing as the population learned the truth about what started the war. The human response came quickly. Representative Laura Bennett would lead the diplomatic delegation, escorted by a full battle fleet. The location would be a neutral station operated by the Galactic Council, ensuring both sides' safety. Laura arrived on the station with a team of advisors and military observers. She carried detailed proposals that had been approved by the Human Coalition Council. As she walked through the station's corridors toward the conference room, she thought about what this negotiation really meant. This was not just about ending a war. This was about teaching the galaxy a lesson about respecting cultures and honoring the dead. This was about making sure no other species would make the same mistake the Zelthians had made. The Zelthian delegation was already seated when Laura entered. They were led by Controller Vexen, who had argued for negotiations from the beginning. Ambassador Thexus sat beside him, looking tired, but determined. They stood as Laura approached. A gesture of respect. Representative Bennett, Vexen began. We have come to discuss terms for ending this conflict. The Zelthian Empire is prepared to withdraw from contested territory and establish clear borders with human space. Laura took her seat and placed a data pad on the table. Controller Vexen, we appreciate your willingness to negotiate. However, you should understand that humanity's demands go beyond territorial adjustments. She activated the data pad, displaying her proposals on the conference room's main screen. Vexen and his delegation read through them with growing surprise. You want our military commander to stand trial? Vexen asked. You want us to pay restitution to civilian families? You want a formal apology and a memorial? Yes, Laura said firmly. Commander Vekthar and his officers committed war crimes under galactic law. They will stand trial in a neutral court with judges from multiple species. The families who lost loved ones at New Haven deserve compensation. And the dead deserve a memorial on the world where they died. Thexus leaned forward. Representative Bennett, we understand these demands. But there is something else listed here. Educational requirements? Laura nodded. That is the most important demand. The Zelthian Empire must add human cultural practices to your military and diplomatic training. Every officer, every diplomat, every government official must learn about human funeral customs and other sacred traditions. You must ensure that no member of your armed forces or government can ever claim ignorance as an excuse for attacking mourners. Vexen looked at the proposal with confusion. You want us to change our education system because of one incident? Laura's expression hardened. Controller, this was not one incident. This was an attack on 17 innocent people who were saying goodbye to someone they loved. This was an attack on children who came to honor an elder who protected them. This was an attack on a daughter burying her father. She pulled up the footage from New Haven on the screen. The Zelthian delegation had seen it before, but watching it again in the presence of a human representative made it feel different. They saw the peaceful ceremony, the mourners in their simple clothes, the casket with the old man's medals. They saw the weapons fire and the chaos that followed. Every human has attended a funeral, Laura continued quietly. Every human understands what it means to grieve, to be vulnerable, to need that moment to say goodbye. Your military attacked us at our most vulnerable. They killed us when we were defenseless and mourning. That is why every human colony, every human fleet, every human civilian united against you. She paused, letting her words sink in. You did not attack a military target. You attacked our humanity itself. And the only way to ensure this never happens again is to make sure your entire society understands what funerals mean to us. Thexus spoke up. Representative Bennett, I have tried to explain human culture to my government for years. I warned them that the attack would provoke this response. They did not listen because they did not understand. Your educational requirement would prevent future misunderstandings. Vexen looked at his fellow council members through the video link connecting them to the homeworld. They conferred privately for several minutes. When they returned their attention to the negotiation, Vexen's posture had changed. We accept your terms, he said slowly. Commander Vekthar will stand trial. We will pay restitution to the families. We will issue a formal apology. And we will implement the educational requirements. Laura nodded. There is one more thing. The apology must be public and specific. It must acknowledge exactly what your forces did. It must state clearly that you attacked a funeral and killed mourners. No vague diplomatic language. The galaxy needs to know what happened, and that you understand the severity of your actions. The negotiations continued for 2 more days, working out the specific details of each requirement. The trial procedures were established with judges from 5 neutral species. The restitution amounts were calculated based on galactic standards. The memorial design was discussed and approved. The educational curriculum was outlined in detail. Finally, the agreement was ready for signing. In the presence of Galactic Council observers and broadcast across known space, Laura Bennett and Controller Vexen affixed their signatures to the treaty. The war was officially over. But the most significant moment came next. Vexen stood before the cameras and delivered the formal apology that had been agreed upon. On behalf of the Xelthian Empire, I apologize to humanity for the attack on New Haven Colony. Our forces fired upon civilians who were gathered for a funeral ceremony. We killed 17 innocent people, including children, who were mourning the death of a community elder. We violated a sacred tradition that humanity holds dear. We showed profound disrespect for human customs and profound disregard for innocent life. His voice was steady, but the shame was evident. We did not understand the significance of what we attacked. That ignorance does not excuse our actions. We have learned that some acts cannot be justified by military necessity or strategic considerations. We have learned that respecting other cultures' sacred traditions is not optional, but essential. We pledge that the Xelthian Empire will never again attack mourners or violate funeral sanctity. The broadcast ended. Across human space, people watched and felt a mixture of satisfaction and continued grief. The apology could not bring back the dead. It could not undo Amy Morrison's death or erase the trauma of that terrible day. But it was acknowledgement. It was accountability. It was a promise that this would not happen again. 3 months later, a memorial was unveiled on New Haven in the central square where the attack occurred. It was made of black stone quarried from the local mountains, polished, smooth, and carved with the names of all 17 who died. At the top, an inscription read, "They came to honor the dead and became honored dead themselves. May all species remember that mourners must be protected and grief must be respected." Admiral Kevin Chen attended the dedication ceremony in person this time. His fleets had returned to normal deployment. The war concluded. He stood with Administrator Greg Palmer, who had fully recovered from his injuries, and together they unveiled the memorial. "This stone will stand for generations," Kevin said to the gathered colonists and dignitaries. "It will remind humanity of what happened here. It will remind other species of what we will defend." Daniel Morrison spent 40 years protecting this colony. Amy Morrison gave her life protecting children. We honor them by ensuring their deaths meant something. Representatives from 20 different alien species attended the ceremony as observers. They had come to learn about human funeral customs firsthand, to understand what their diplomatic and military personnel needed to know. Among them was Ambassador Thexus, who had finally been recognized by his own government for his cultural expertise. Thexus approached Laura Bennett after the ceremony. "Representative, I want you to know that the first class of Xelthian officers has completed the new cultural training. They spent 2 weeks learning about human customs, including funeral traditions. Many of them were deeply affected by what they learned." Laura nodded. "Ambassador, I hope this tragedy leads to better understanding between our species. We never wanted war. We only wanted respect for our traditions and justice for our dead." "You have both now," Thexus replied. "And my people have learned a lesson we will never forget. We learned it at great cost, but we learned it thoroughly. You never attack a human funeral." The phrase had already become known across the galaxy. "Never attack a human funeral" was now used as shorthand for respecting other species' sacred customs. It appeared in diplomatic training manuals and military codes of conduct. Other species began sharing their own sacred traditions more openly, ensuring potential allies understood cultural boundaries. The final scene of the peace process occurred back on Earth. The first graduates of the expanded Zelthian Cultural Training Program visited human colonies as goodwill ambassadors. They attended local events, learned about regional customs, and built relationships with human communities. One young Zelthian officer named Kelrin visited New Haven specifically. Administrator Greg Palmer met her at the memorial. Kelrin stood silently before the black stone, reading each name carved into its surface. She was young, probably not much older than Amy Morrison had been. "I was in my first year at the academy when the attack happened," Kelrin said quietly. "I remember hearing about it and thinking it was just another military operation. Then the humans captured our academy. They could have killed us all. Instead, they treated us with respect and showed us recordings of what really happened here." She looked at Greg with honest pain in her eyes. "I am so sorry for what my military did. I am sorry that I did not understand before. I promise that I will spend my career making sure other Zelthians understand the importance of respecting other cultures." Greg studied her for a moment, then nodded. "The dead are gone. We cannot bring them back, but we can honor them by building a better future. Your presence here, your willingness to learn, that honors them." As the sun set over New Haven, Greg remained at the memorial. He thought about Daniel Morrison and Amy Morrison and the other 15 whose lives were cut short. He thought about how their deaths had changed the galaxy, had taught species to respect each other's sacred traditions, had prevented future tragedies. He placed flowers at the base of the memorial, a human custom for honoring the dead. And he made a promise to those who rested in the soil of New Haven. "We will remember," he said softly. "We will tell your stories. We will make sure the galaxy never forgets what happened when someone attacked a human funeral. Your deaths brought change. Your sacrifice brought understanding. Rest in peace." The war was over. The memorial stood. The lesson was learned. And across the galaxy, every species now understood that some traditions were sacred, that some moments were inviolable, that some acts would unite an entire species in righteous anger. The Zelthian Empire had learned why you never attack a human funeral. It was a lesson they would teach to every generation, ensuring that this tragedy would be the last of its kind. And perhaps, in some way, that was the memorial that Daniel Morrison and Amy Morrison and all the others would have wanted most. Daniel Morrison was laid to rest in the colony's cemetery. Amy Morrison was buried beside him. 15 other graves marked the loss of those who died that terrible day. Admiral Kevin Chen attended via video link, unable to leave his flagship, but wanting to pay his respects. "We fight this war for you," he said in his brief remarks. "We fight so that no other human community will have their funerals attacked. We fight so that the galaxy understands that some acts cannot be tolerated." Daniel Morrison spent 40 years protecting this colony. Amy Morrison gave her life protecting children. They will be remembered. The funeral proceeded without incident, as all funerals should, and across human space, the message was clear. The war would continue until the Zelthians learned their lesson. The war would continue until there was justice for New Haven. The council chamber fell silent. The magnitude of the human response was becoming clear. This was not a border skirmish. This was war. "Why?" Vexen asked quietly. "Why would they risk so much for one colony?" Ambassador Thexis's report was pulled up on the main display. His warnings, ignored for days, now seemed prophetic. The council members read his words about human funeral customs, about the cultural significance of respecting the dead, about how the attack would be viewed by every human everywhere. "They are not fighting for one colony," Vexen said slowly. "They are fighting because we attacked something sacred to their entire species. We did not just kill 17 humans. We violated a tradition that every human holds dear." The reality settled over the council like a heavy weight. They had made a catastrophic miscalculation. They thought they were teaching humans a lesson about territorial rights. Instead, they had taught humanity that the Zelthian Empire was an enemy that must be stopped. In Zelthian space, Ambassador Thexis received the intelligence reports with growing dread. He had lived among humans for 5 years, studying their culture for his diplomatic post. He understood immediately what his government had done. He sent an urgent message to the Imperial Council. We have made a catastrophic error. The gathering we attacked was not a military formation. It was a funeral. One of humanity's most sacred ceremonies. Humans view attacking funerals as one of the worst possible crimes. We have united them against us in a way nothing else could. I strongly recommend immediate diplomatic outreach and full apology. The Imperial Council read his message and dismissed it. They pointed to their superior fleet numbers and technological advantages. They noted that humanity's military was spread across many systems while Zelthian forces were concentrated. They decided that Ambassador Thexus had spent too much time among humans and lost perspective. They sent reinforcements to New Haven and began fortifying their border systems. They were confident their show of strength would make the humans back down. It was the second mistake the Zelthian Empire made. The first was attacking the funeral. The second was not listening to the one person who understood humans well enough to see what was coming. In 4 days, the human fleets would arrive at New Haven, and the Zelthian Empire would begin to learn why you never, ever attack a human funeral. Particularly those 5 words about the funeral would change everything. He could not imagine that those words would unite humanity in a way nothing else ever had. He only knew that the Zelthians had made a terrible mistake. They had attacked humans at their most vulnerable moment. They had killed people who were honoring their dead. They had shattered a sacred ceremony with violence. And humanity would not forget. Outside, the survivors began the grim work of tending to the wounded and counting the dead. The funeral they had gathered for was ruined, but there would be more funerals now. 17 more, including Amy Morrison, who died as bravely as her father had lived. The Zelthian ships remained overhead, their weapons still active, their commanders confident they had delivered a message that would make the humans flee. They did not understand what they had done. They did not know about human funeral customs or the deep cultural significance of respecting the dead. They saw only a gathering of primitives who needed to be frightened into submission. It was the greatest miscalculation in the history of the Zelthian Empire. And they would not realize their mistake until it was far too late.